This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And make sure to order Jamie Glazov's new critically acclaimed jihadist Psychopath, how he is charming, seducing, and devouring us. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, what happened when a Jewish activist confronted Rashida Tlaib's Jew hatred at Rutgers? With us this evening, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the editor of the blog The Point at frontpagemag.com. Daniel Greenfield, what an honor and a pleasure to have you back on the gang.
It's an honor, and it's very good to be back.
Fantastic. Can I ask you quickly, what is the update on the hat?
The hat is still sitting on my head. If it actually starts levitating and rising into the air, we'll know that socialism works because fantasies are real.
Okay, I'll have to reflect on that and get back to you on it, but it's very inspiring to always see you with the hat, Daniel. Now, this is such a disturbing and actually horrifying issue that we're discussing tonight. Just branches out into just so many horrifying phenomena. I want to start with this, Daniel, and we credit this show to your article at Front Page about it. Before we get to this incident at Rutgers, just a disgrace, just want to talk a little bit about Rashida Tlaib. I think about the 4-year-old Jewish girl, Einat, that was murdered by Samir Kunter, who smashed her skull against a rock with his rifle. Now, Rashida Tlaib's pal, Abbas Hamideh, praises Kunter. And, Rashida Tlaib had Hamideh in her office, and they were taking these pictures together. What do you make of that?
No, it's really inevitable, because when you support terrorism, then you support the murder of children, you support the murder of Jews, you support the murder of Christians, and really even other Muslims that don't go along with your agenda. Now, the Democrats have bought into the idea that Islam is a religion of peace, and that Islamic terrorism is just the product of people who are resisting oppression, and that's something that Omar and Tlaib very much sell in the case of Israel. But this is what resistance actually looks like. It's the murder of children. It's the murder of people who have done absolutely nothing, people who are non-combatants, who are in no position to even fight. But you have the religious leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Muslim Brotherhood is really dominates Muslim organizations in America, coming out and saying that all the Jewish people in Israel are fair game. They're fair game to be killed. And this is very much what the infamous hadith says. So this is, as a devout Muslim, what Omar believe. They believe that all Jews are fair game and to be killed. They believe really that anybody who does not submit to Islamic law is fair game and deserves to be killed.
Absolutely. Daniel, then another thing. Rashida Tlaib talking about how the Palestinians created a safe haven for Jews during and after the Holocaust. I mean, I don't know where to start.
We're creating a safe haven for ladies of the evening.
Right. If I even said one thing, we think about the Grand Mufti Muhammad Amin al-Husseini and how he was begging Hitler to bring the Holocaust to the Middle East during the war and afterwards. Just give us just a few thoughts on Rashida Tlaib saying this about the safe haven that the Jewish people somehow received at the hands of the Palestinians during and after the war.
Even before the Nazis rose to power, you had horrifying massacres of Jews in Israel, particularly the Hebron massacre. The Muslim Brotherhood was closely aligned with the Nazis. The Mufti is obviously an example, but the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, which again, all Islamists in America pretty much bow their heads to, had been influenced by Nazi Germany, at least as far as tactics and policy went. They translated Mein Kampf into Arabic and promoted it. Egypt actually became a safe haven for Nazi war criminals after the war as a result of this Muslim Brotherhood alliance. Within Israel itself, you had regular massacres, you had regular attacks, and Nazi propaganda repeatedly being funneled and played on the radio. And to this day, Hitler is extremely popular in the Muslim world. I mentioned previously Qaradawi's fatwa that all the Jews could be killed. Qaradawi himself praised Hitler and said that hopefully next time will be at the hands of the believers, by which he means Muslims. There was actually a guy running for Fatah, which is the Palestinian Authority, who actually was nicknamed Hitler. He grew a mustache, and he was popular because, again, Hitler was very popular in that part of the world. So the idea that Muslims, that so-called Palestinians provided any kind of safe haven is completely backward. It's the exact opposite of reality. There were, as you mentioned, the Mufti was obviously encouraging Hitler to kill Jews, but it was not just the Mufti. You had a whole spectrum of Islamist leaders who very much are aligned with the Nazis before and even after the war, and even in this present day continue to admire Hitler and the Nazis. Mein Kampf continues to be a bestseller in Muslim countries like Turkey.
Absolutely. Now look, recently, Israeli rescuers tried to revive a Muslim boy who had fallen into a reservoir. Now, Rashida Tlaib retweeted a false claim that Jews had kidnapped the boy and had thrown him into a water well, quote unquote water well. This is a blood libel. What do you make of it, Daniel?
It's a blood libel, and it's completely typical. There's something called Hollywood, which is constantly manufacturing these atrocities. Now, sometimes it just takes photos from entirely different places, for example, from Syria or from Iraq, and claims this is just what happened now. In some cases, they take things that actually did happen and completely misattribute them and mischaracterize them. The goal is to just manufacture this constant propaganda. The media rarely fact checks them. And of course, it's completely politically incorrect to call out someone like Tlaib or Omar, or when the Sarsour for simply lying and making this stuff up and engaging in these blood libels. So in this case, in Rutgers, there was one man who actually stood up and confronted her and called her out on it and paid the price for it.
Right. So let's get to that now. We've discussed this Rashida Tlaib character, if that's one word that we can use to describe her. Rutgers University hosts the 14th annual Interfaith Prophet Muhammad Conference. It just sounds so rosy and peaceful, this interfaith thing. The speaker's Tlaib, and then they've got this Craig Considine individual. And then tell us about this conference. They have that imam there. Yeah.
Front Page Magazine just ran a great piece on Considine, but suffice it to say that the interfaith component of this was two Islamists and one dhimmi. That's the Islamic idea of interfaith. You've got one guy who's a regular appeaser who supports BDS, who defends Hamas, who's regularly on the attack against anything that, and completely, of course, whitewashes and defends Muhammad, who, aside from massacring Jews, also massacred Christians and really destroyed the cradle of Christianity, the Islamic conquest under Muhammad, and after him destroyed the cradle of Christianity. And so when you have Christians, when you have Jews actually defending Islamists, those are people who are completely identifying with their oppressors.
Right, and they had this Imam Saeed al-Qazwini, who has accused Israel of being behind ISIS. I just wonder, why wasn't Robert Spencer or Annie Cyrus or Pamela Geller invited on the panel? Just such a mystery. Now, tell us about this, what happened there, and then about this brave Jewish individual who stood up and wanted to ask a question.
So you had this Islamic idea of interfaith, which is two Muslims and one dhimmi, all agreeing that we needed more to bring more Islamist migrants to America. And this is the argument they were making. Tlaib was in the middle of launching into a speech about how racist America is because, we've only taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Muslim immigrants, and we haven't taken billions, so clearly we must be racist. And Dov Heikind, who leads an actual organization fighting anti-Semitism, who was a former elected official, he actually came down there from New York, and he stood up and he asked her about her own anti-Semitism, including the blood libel. She just tweeted, and now I neglected to mention, this was the conference organized by Muslims for Peace. So it must be a very peaceful conference. But the moment Dov Heikind got up and actually asked about Tlaib's own anti-Semitism, he was immediately confronted with threats. And of course, he was forced to leave the room because at the Muslims for Peace conference, you can't possibly ask about Islamic anti-Semitism.
So all he did was try to ask a question.
He asked her about her own anti-Semitism. He asked her if she was willing to apologize for the false blood libel that she'd made. And again, immediately he was confronted by members of the audience who were threatening him and intimidating him. And shortly thereafter, police arrived and let him out of the room. Because this is just how it works when it comes to free speech in the face of Islamic intimidation.
What do you make of this, and what do we make of Rutgers? This is a university. This is supposed to be a place that encourages diversity and intellectual curiosity and the exchange of ideas, this higher learning institution. What do you make of it?
Rutgers has unfortunately a very long, ugly history. They have a lot of radical faculty. We have the sorts of people who will defend Islamic terrorists on a regular basis. It goes without saying that a lot of them are anti-Israel. You've got a lot of active anti-Israel groups on campus. So unfortunately, this is not a surprise. This has been really an issue for a while. You have all sorts of bizarre outbursts of anti-Semitism there. You have bizarre outbursts of anti-Americanism there. I mean, you've got an actual member of the faculty who was trying to run for president of Iran and was under monitoring by the NSA. So UCLA is the entire UC system is very much a mess. NYU and Columbia are really bad, but Rutgers is definitely in the top 10. And when the David Horowitz Freedom Center actually listed the top 10 pro-terrorist schools, that's why Rutgers was in there, because it's not that many people who are outside the tri-state area in New York, New Jersey are aware of that. But those who actually are in that area are well aware that Rutgers is a very messed up place.
And what is being done about it?
So President Trump's education department has actually reopened a civil rights investigation going back to 2011, when you had an anti-Israel event being convened by anti-Israel activists. And the perverse thing that they did was they were calling this never again for anyone. They were trying to hijack the Holocaust, accusing Israelis of being Nazis. So actually back then, some Holocaust survivors and students came by. And immediately, this event, which was supposed to be free, they immediately began charging people who they thought were not their supporters. So people who looked Jewish, they began charging money. Meanwhile, people in keffiyehs, people they thought were their supporters, were still getting in for free. Now, this is obviously discriminatory. It's completely unacceptable. I should mention, by the way, Rutgers is a state university of New Jersey, which means it's taxpayer funded, is a public university. So there was obvious outrage there, and there was an investigation, but the Obama administration very predictably, again, shut down the investigation. You know, the future must not belong to those who criticize the Prophet of Islam. So the Obama administration shut down the investigation. The Trump administration, however, has reopened the investigation into Rutgers, and this will hopefully add fuel to the fire.
So, Daniel, can you imagine at a university campus if there was an event where if you proved you were Christian and Jewish, you get in for free, but if you're wearing a hijab or other clothing that shows that you're Muslim, that you're charged to get in? Can you imagine, number one, what would happen, and whether or not this would be on CNN and MSNBC right now?
It would be a national scandal. We'd be having a dialogue about it. You know, one of the more ridiculous cases of Islamic discrimination that appeared everywhere in the media was this Muslim female chaplain who was on the plane. I don't know if you remember this, and she wanted, I think, a Diet Coke or a Sprite or something, and they poured it into the cup, but they wouldn't give her the can. And she claimed that the only reason they did not give her the can of Diet Coke was because they were Islamophobic and she was Muslim. And this was on CNN, it was on NPR, it was on every news station for 2 whole days. So you can only imagine what would happen here. The pettiest, the slightest claim of discrimination by Islamists immediately results in an outpouring of media sympathy and media attention. Meanwhile, you can have people being murdered by Islamists and the media will pay no attention whatsoever.
You know, Daniel, in the most tragic sense, we've gotten to the point where when we think about what happened to the men of the Banu Qurayza tribe, that was actually an interfaith project that Prophet Muhammad was engaged in, and the men that would have opposed what happened to them were being Islamophobic. What do you think?
Well, you know, this is how all Islamic interfaith projects end. They can have a very temporary, tentative existence, but in the end, Islamic interfaith projects always end with the suppression of anybody who is in the way. And even we've had this in more recent times. When you think about what happened in Iran, when you had secularists allying with Islamists, they were devoured by the Islamists. Same thing happened again in Egypt, where you had liberals allying with the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, of course, was the one who came out on top and stomped them quite quickly. When there are Jews or Christians or anybody else who thinks that they can successfully ally with Islamists, whether it's gays for Palestine or whatever it may be, the ending is always entirely assured. It's like allying with Nazis or communists. There can only be one conclusion because there's only one right way as far as Islamists are concerned. You can't actually have an alliance with them. You can be their useful idiot, which is all that these people are.
Very sad times. I'm not going to be waiting or holding my breath for Anderson Cooper or Rachel Maddow or Don Lemon to discuss, to show the video clip of what happened to this Jewish gentleman that tried to ask a question, nor should I think we be waiting for them to have a panel discussion about it with people like you and Bridget Gabriel and Robert Spencer and Annie Cyrus. Let's not hold our breath. Daniel Greenfield, in 30 seconds, what should we all be thinking about in terms of what just happened here?
Well, again, it is an important reminder of how vital free speech on campus is, because Islamists have plugged into this whole intersectional network, which gives them the ability to ally with the left, to shut down free speech, to describe anybody who disagrees with them as a bigot, as a member of a hate group. Just in two recent examples, there's just an editorial now that I'm going to blog about for The Point, in which a Muslim says that anybody who complains that Islamic terrorism against Jews that is always wrong is a racist. You've got actually Betty McCollum and Tlaib and Omar coming out and saying that Jewish critics of them over their positions are engaging in hate speech. So Islamists are very much plugged into this intersectional, politically correct, woke ideas. And when you actually have that happen on campus, it means that their critics are completely silenced, even when they're ones who are actually engaging in hate speech, even when they're ones that are calling for the destruction and murder of Jews, Christians, and other people. That's why it's so important to fight for free speech, and it's very important that President Trump is fighting for free speech.
Thank you, Daniel. I can't help from asking this, though. I'm fascinated by the left in general, and not in an inspiring way. I've just been studying the left all my life because it's such an evil force. People like Bernie Sanders, this is a Jewish individual. Why is Bernie Sanders, as a Jewish person, so quiet about an event like this?
Well, Bernie Sanders isn't just quiet. He's publicly allied with Omar and Tlaib. But when you talk about Bernie Sanders being a Jewish person, he's a person with a Jewish last name, much like Karl Marx. This is a guy who likes to brag that he was in a kibbutz in Israel. He was in a Stalinist kibbutz in Israel, whose founder was arrested for spying for the Soviet Union. This is a guy who was allied with every anti-Semitic group going back as far as possible. This was the guy who was honeymooning in the Soviet Union while there were political dissidents, Jewish, Christian, and otherwise actually being locked up. This was a guy who allied with Marxist regimes in Latin America that were persecuting and driving out Jews. This was a guy who allied with every radical leftist group, and at some point he began allying with Islamists because there is this long-standing red-green alliance because both of them really believe in overturning the world as it is and replacing it with their own horrible utopia. And in that utopia, there will be no room for religious people at all. Bernie Sanders has no religion. To the extent that he seems to admire any religious leader, it's Pope Francis, and I don't think it's because he's a devout Catholic, but because he admires radical leftists. This is what Bernie Sanders is. This is his religion. His religion is the radical left.
Daniel Greenfield, thank you so much for joining the Glazov Gang this evening. Thank you for all your wonderful and courageous and noble work at Front Page Magazine and everything else that you do.
Thank you for your own work, and it's very much a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. And we will see you soon on the Glazov Gang. Good night.